All right, welcome back. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon and The Blackest Heart, both books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today I'm going to be reviewing book number 2 in Stephen Donaldson's Gap cycle. This is entitled Gap into Vision, Forbidden Knowledge. This came out in 1991. Now, I've got the other 4 books in the series. This is book 1. Here's book 2, book 3, book 4, and book 5. They make a nice set, and take my word for it. This is one of the best science fiction sagas, space opera sagas you'll ever read. Let's talk about the cover. You know I love graphic design and cover illustration. This one's got a bit of a minimalist look to it as opposed to this graphic here. Both were done by an artist named Chris Hopkins. Books 3, 4, and 5 were illustrated by Stephen Ewell. And we'll get you a close-up of, we'll get you a close-up of, we got some nice covers. Anyway, enough about the cover. Let's talk about the books. So if you watch my review of The Gap into Conflict, the real story, you will see how this series starts out. This is kind of a short little novel, sort of a short little prologue to the series. This novel sets up the series, so go ahead and watch my review of this. This is sort of like The Hobbit to the rest of the series being Lord of the Rings, if that makes sense. Although it's kind of like The Hobbit with a lot more sexual BDSM torture. I'm not making this up. In fact, right from the get-go in book number 2, we've got a lot more, it's kind of like a tiresome theme almost at this point in the series of the sex used for control. This book has a lot of graphic sexual scenes in this book, right up front in this book. Now, if you can get past that, if you can just get past the weird nature of these first two, the first book and then the first part of this book, you're really setting yourself up for one of the best science fiction space opera series ever written. And I discussed a little bit of the sex part in my review of book 1, so I won't rehash that here. Let's just say that the theme of this story is taking a hero, a villain, and a victim, the 3 main characters, Thermopylae, Morn Highland, and Nick Sicorso, and flipping all of their roles by the end of the series so that the hero becomes the villain, the victim becomes the villain or the hero. I mean, they throughout this entire series, they all go through, at one point or another, they're all either hero, victim, or villain. All of them. That's kind of cool. So that's kind of like why the books are set up the way they are. And if you can just get at least the first book and the first part of this book are set up the way they are, if you can just get past that, it really sets you up for some pretty amazing drama. It starts out with Angus Thermopylae, our villain in book 1. He's in prison now, sentenced to be frozen or killed, and there's a prison guard named Milos, or he's more of a prison investigator, and he's trying to figure out what happened to the police officer Morn Highland. Now, Morn Highland was our victim in book 1, and she was victimized by Angus Thermopylae in his starship over and over and over. In fact, she had a thing in her head that controlled her, that Angus could use to control her every move. The reason there's a thing in her head, this implant in her head, is because people get gap sickness. There's this, the speed of light is called gap travel, and people, 1 out of about every 100 persons gets gap sickness. In other words, they cannot survive light speed travel. And so they have to have this implant in their head to make them be able to survive light speed travel. However, that implant in their head also gives whoever's in control of the controller of the implant, it gives them, well, free will to do whatever. And so it's kind of, they're actually illegal. The gap implants and the controllers are actually illegal. So this Milos, the investigator at the prison, is trying to figure out why Morn Highland would have spent time with Angus Thermopylae on his starship. I mean, Morn Highland was a former police officer, a former daughter of a famous starship captain, and she's beautiful beyond belief. Why would she spend time with this greasy-looking Thermopylae on his starship? Anyway, that's the mystery. Now, Morn herself, now she has been rescued, or so she thinks, by the hero, Nick Soccorso. And she gets onto his ship, the Captain's Fancy, and it's crewed with a whole crew of interesting characters. One of the best starship crews that you'll ever find in space opera. You know what I'm talking about, the starship crews. You know, you got your Serenity, you've got your Battlestar Galactica crews, you've got your crew of all of the different starships that have ever been in fantasy. The crew aboard Captain's Fancy is as good as any of them, if not better. But Morn Highland realizes pretty quick that she has not necessarily been rescued, but she might be in a worse spot than when she was with her original kidnapper, because now Nick Soccorso is just, he's not the hero that she thought he was. Now the reader, as you read this series, you know nothing of Nick Soccorso. Even though he's a big player in book number 1 with our 3 main characters, we really don't get to know much about him in book 1. But then in book 2, we start to get to know about our hero, Nick Soccorso, and we start to realize he might be the biggest villain in the book. See, in book 1, he played the hero. Now in book 2, he is a massive villain. So it's just like one of these things. It's just like a great, I mean, there's great, with Thermopylae and the prison, there's great prison scenes. There's just the interesting prison setup that they've got out in outer space. We've got so many starships. Just, it's a fast space opera. We've got an alien species that's just creepy and dangerous that we're dealing with. And then we've got our hero, our villain, and our victim. And they're all changing roles at any given moment. And it's just absolutely a great thing. And I'm rereading these and loving them. I'm loving them. I did want to put that trigger warning, though, about the massive amounts of sexual assault that happen throughout this book and within the first 30 pages of this book. After that, it does not happen anymore. It's done. We're done with that part of the story. But those scenes do set up the rest of what's going on. So I understand why Donaldson has them in there. I just want to make sure that people that don't like reading about that stuff pick these books up, and for the first book and then the first 10th of the second book, they're just like, oh my God. Anyway, these are great science fiction space opera books. I'm glad I'm rereading them for the channel. I can't wait to get to books 3, 4, and 5. I read these all back in the early 1990s when they came out. I don't remember much about them. So it's cool to go back in and reread them. So I give this is about a 9.5 out of 10. It's just that good.